Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about intersectionality, how embracing the complexity of human diversity fosters equitable environments. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want to make you aware of who we are at the Office of Human Rights and Equity. My name is Claudia M, and I am an outreach coordinator here at the Office of Human Rights and Equity. And our job here is that we are an entity of the Howard County government that seeks to eradicate discrimination, increase equal opportunity, and protect and promote human rights in the county. The office serves as a catalyst in fostering attitudes and beliefs among Howard County residents, which confirm that all individuals have an equal opportunity to enjoy a wholesome and productive quality of life and can pursue their lives free of discrimination. Now, we here at the Office of Human Rights and Equity, we do this in a variety of ways. The first is that we have our investigations unit, which actually investigates and mediates and settles cases of discrimination in Howard County, Maryland. We also have our equity and restorative practices unit, who are currently in the process of doing a variety of or they did rather, a variety of community conversations and gathered a variety of data, both concerning the Howard County government as well as Howard County as a community. And they are currently writing a report and a strategic plan on how we can best implement equity within Howard County. And then, of course, you have the outreach unit, where we actually plan a variety of trainings, workshops, cultural events, and we do our best to try to actually create the atmosphere as well as provide our community with the resources and the tools necessary to ensure that we can kind of lessen the investigator's job, right? That's how we all work together here in the office. We have individuals who are trying their best to protect your classes, to protect you, to settle and mediate your cases concerning discrimination. But my unit is passionate about ensuring that you experience fair housing. We're passionate about ensuring that you live in a community that is engaged and intervenes. Thus, we have our bystander intervention training. And we have a variety of other workshops and listening sessions that we believe are geared toward promoting and educating you on how to be better, more equitable citizens here in Howard County. And so if you ever experience any kind of discrimination and you happen to live in Howard County, live, work, play, or study here, we want you to reach out to us at 410-313-6430, or you can email us at OHRE@howardcountymd.gov. We want to make sure that if you ever experience any kind of discrimination, that you get the protections that you deserve. Now, with that said, I am excited for us to jump right into our discussion for this afternoon. And so what I want to encourage all of you to do right now is to just think about the word intersectionality. Think about the word intersectionality. What is the word are some of the things that come to your mind when you think of that word? And I want you to write in the chat. This is your first assignment. Write in the chat a sentence that you believe best describes all of your identity markers, whether those be gender or racial or religious, etc., whatever it might be. I want you to write a sentence describing as much of your identity as possible. All right. So go ahead and take a couple of minutes to do just that. Go ahead. I want you to type in the chat right now. How do you identify? What are your racial identity markers? What are your cultural, religious identity markers, so that we can have a conversation about that? I see your writing. I see Trent. He is a profoundly compassionate, empathetic, intuitive, strong Black male. That is a lot. That's good. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm looking for. How do you identify? How would you describe yourself? Let me know in the chat right now. I see them coming. I see them coming. Caleb says, I am a straight, cis, white, male American citizen, Seventh-day Adventist, raised in a divorced, lower-class, blue-collar family, college educated in an interracial marriage, and currently living in the Pacific Northwest. That's what I'm talking about, Caleb. That's really good right there. Exactly. What is your sentence? Give me your sentence. I am Marla Moore, an African-American, Afro-Caribbean, Muslim, married parent, straight, liberal, open, free artist, humanitarian. Charles, he is African-American. Wale is a Black Nigerian-American heterosexual male. Lucy is an advocate, caring and is a strong Black woman. Anybody else? I would say, Yolanda, I identify as an African-American Christian mother, wife, leader, sister, daughter, West Coast raised, beach lover, and humanitarian. Kay is a Black Bermudian Seventh-day Adventist Christian mother, sister, aunt, daughter, counselor, social worker, who is passionate about women and children. Kenya is a Black female Christian, divorced, single mother, social worker, college educated. Man, if I was to jump in here, I would say I am a Christian, light-skinned Black woman, Georgetown graduate, PhD dropout, born in Illinois, raised in Michigan, working in Maryland, preacher, cisgender female, right? So in other words, right, if we just take the opportunity to think about all of the terms that we have noted right here in this chat, then we are seeing right here that everyone is intersectional. And if I were honest, there are even aspects of yourself that could not be shared even here in that one sentence that you gave, right? That you don't have a comprehensive picture of yourself just in this one sentence. And that's what intersectionality is about. Intersectionality is about identifying what are the ways in which every aspect of my being shows up into a particular room. Right? And how does that impact not only what I do, but how I am treated? But what I want you to understand about intersectionality is that it was first coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality to describe the experience of Black women in the criminal justice system. Now, to this end, she suggests that Black women are served, helped, treated, and sentenced very differently from other women, particularly white women, because they are both Black and woman. Now, Crenshaw further suggests that intersectionality does not just converge at the crossroads of race and gender, but she argues that the intersectional realities of socioeconomic status, unemployment, or underemployment also reveal that intersectionality of gender and class oppression, right? So that when we're talking about intersectionality, we're talking about the fact that you're not just having personality traits. You're not just having racial, religious, ethnic, gender based markers or even socioeconomic statuses merging together, but rather you actually have systems of power merging and converging together, right? So we as people have an intersectional expression, but our systems, our organizations, powers of domination also converge and have these intersectional expressions as well. And so when we're talking about intersectionality, we're talking about the fact that at some point, everywhere and in every aspect of life, there is a crossroads. And so how is that crossroads impacting everyone's lived experience? One of the greatest intersectional systems of oppression that exist in our society, particularly here in the States, is that of racism, right? Because racism, while it's typically talked about as something that is exclusively prejudice or name calling or something of that nature, racism is actually an intricate intersectional system of power that merges both the legal, the educational, the religious, and the cultural all together. This is why the task of dismantling racism is so difficult, and it's so large, and it's so broad, because the fact of the matter is we're not just changing one law, right? But we're also not having to impact culture. We're also having to change media. We're also having to change the images that are projected on television. We're also having to change our curriculums within our educational system. We've got to change the way we do healthcare. We have to change a variety of systems in order to dismantle racism. And that is a great example of intersectionality, in the sense that racism exists and perpetuates only because you have multiple systems that are converging or crossing or are operating simultaneously at play. So when we're talking about intersectionality, we're talking about the intersectionality of systems. We're talking about the intersectionality of power. We're talking about the intersectionality of persons as well, right? Like we just talked about in our kind of icebreaker session, right? Like, what are the many ways in which I show up into a room? How does my being college educated, how does my being Black, my being a woman, my being a Christian, my being heterosexual, my being Midwestern, my being American, how does all of those things impact the way I perform or act in a room? But then also, how does it impact what I do once I get into that room and how others treat me when I'm in that room? Intersectionality, though, has made this cultural shift since 1989, and it has actually become a major critical social theory. Now, this is important because when you actually talk to Kimberly Crenshaw, she's very clear that she actually had no intention of the term kind of becoming everything that it is. But Patricia Hill Collins, in her book Intersectionality as Critical Social Theory, actually documents how intersectionality has shifted from just being a metaphoric term to now actually serving as a tool within communities by activists as well as by scholars in academia to actually do this kind of social justice, human rights work. And so Collins cites that Crenshaw stated that her own use of the term was just a metaphor. She is amazed at how it gets over and underused. She was simply looking at the way that all these systems of oppression overlap. But the reality is that this is such a great term, and this is why Crenshaw was not able to kind of control its meaning and its evolution, right? Because it really, yes, it encompasses everything that's happening in the criminal justice system. It absolutely encompasses everything that's happening in a variety of dominating systems of power, but it is also just a really good example or a really good term to describe and explain the diversity of all human peoples, right? Because I love being able to acknowledge the fact that there are multiple pieces of me that make me into a whole person. And it is the inner diversity that I possess that actually empowers me to be able to also be a diverse person in the rooms and spaces that I move in to occupy, right? So diversity is made up of human intersectionality. So that when we're talking about the fact that this is Global Diversity Awareness Month, what we're saying is that we want to not just tolerate, not just kind of superficially affirm and celebrate, but rather by engaging and understanding intersectionality, we are then saying that diversity actually is a cornerstone, a foundation upon which all equity, social justice work is done and engaged, right? So if I really want to do proper equity work, if I really want to do proper human rights, social justice work, or if I am someone who has an organization of some kind and I'm wanting to actually make sure that the services, the opportunities, the resources that I am providing to my clients or my patients or my consumers, if that's my end goal, my outcome, then that means that I have to be thinking about the fact that no one person can fully be put into a box, right? Like in our chat alone right now, we have divorcees, we have the college educated, we have someone who grew up in a white, blue collar, working class family. We have individuals that are Christian. We have individuals that are Muslim. We have a variety of people in this one space. So intersectionality says, I can't box Marla into a corner and say, well, she's Black, so she must be Christian. And if she's a Black woman, all the stats say that Black women are Christians. But Marla comes into a room and says, I am Muslim. So then what do we do when people do not meet our assumptions, our biases? And the fact of the matter is our engagement with one another is intimately attached to what we assume about each other based on what we see, how they speak, how they express themselves in a room. And so intersectionality says, okay, let me take a step back. Let me acknowledge that I am a multifaceted person. And so the person I am more than likely engaging with is also a multifaceted person. So that the first takeaway that I really want all of you guys to have is that the term intersectionality was originally used as a metaphor to describe how systems of power converge in the practice of oppression. But the term intersectionality currently is used as a tool to describe the multiplicity of human expression, the convergence of systems of power, as well as the varied and multi-layered approaches in addressing and dealing with acts and systems of discrimination. All right? Now, if we're talking about intersectionality and we're talking about equity, then we have to also address the fact that equity and equality are not the same, right? So if equity and equality are not the same, then what is equity? If we're talking about the fact that we want to understand intersectionality so that we can create equitable spaces, equitable environments, what is equity? What is an equitable space? What is an equitable environment? Well, equity, while it sounds similar to equality, in its implementation has a very different effect on marginalized people. So equity, according to the World Health Organization, is defined as, quote, the absence of avoidable or remediable differences among groups of people, whether those groups are defined socially, economically, demographically, or geographically. Now, the Race Matters Institute, Paula Dressel, also has a really great take on equity. She says the route to achieving equity will not be accomplished through treating everyone equally. It will be achieved by treating everyone equitably or justly according to their circumstances. So that when we're talking about equity, we're actually talking about not leveling the playing field, but recognizing that if everyone is on the same level, there is still the possibility that they might not get the resources that they need. There's a picture here that I think really describes this very well. It's a picture of a tree, and there are apples on the tree, and the tree is kind of leaning to the left, my left, your right, a little bit. And so the apples are a little bit further down for this one apple picker, and they're a little further up for another apple picker. And so equity means providing both apple pickers with ladders, but the ladders are not the same height. So the apple picker who gets a ladder where the apples are kind of tilted further down to the ground, that ladder is shorter than the ladder that the apple picker on the right gets, where his apples are further up to reach. Equity says, I believe everyone should have access and ability and opportunity to get and grab and pluck the apples. But equality says we should give everybody the same ladder. But the fact of the matter is if you give the same ladder, then the second apple picker is still not going to be able to reach the apples. Equity says, I have to acknowledge that the tree is bent. I have to acknowledge that the tree is bending toward one direction over another. And so equity then says, I need to give this man a shorter ladder and this man a taller ladder. And we have so many individuals. I'm thinking of, just off the top of my head, even right now, Dr. King, when he made the comment, how can you tell a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he does not own any boots, right? It's that same concept of there are some in our society who do not have boots. There are some in our society for where the apple tree is tending and leaning towards a certain direction. And so they have a privilege, an easier access to apples than maybe some other individuals. So that when we're saying that we want to take intersectionality into consideration, then we're saying we want to take into consideration the fact that the apple is bent. Intersectionality says that the tree is bent. Intersectionality says that we have two individuals who are trying to pick apples. Intersectionality says that everyone here needs to eat apples to live. Intersectionality says that we want to take all of every single aspect of our existence or the circumstance here into consideration before making a decision about how to best remedy the situation, right? So how can I, through the lens of intersectionality, view the circumstance in its totality? And then how can I make the best equitable decision for all parties involved? An equitable decision that takes the converging of discrimination into consideration, that takes the persons involved into consideration, so that everyone gets apples in spite of the fact that the tree is bent. So that when we're talking about creating equitable spaces and we're talking about equity and we're talking about intersectionality, the second takeaway that I really want you to have is that equity and equality are words that sound similar, but they are very different. And they are, in fact, not interchangeable. If you ever forget the difference between equity and equality, I always want you to think about that bending tree that we just talked about, that there are some who can access some parts of the tree and others who can't access it at all. Equality attempts to level the playing field by offering all people the exact same resources, the exact same way, at the exact same time. Equity, rather, takes intersectionality into consideration by determining what is the best course of action given all of these circumstances. What opportunities, resources, services, etc., should be provided to a group or a person or a demographic based on their specific circumstances. So that if there is anything that you left with today, I would want it to be that intersectionality understood leads to equity applied. Just tweet that. Just tweet at HOCO OHRE. Intersectionality understood leads to equity applied. Why? Because every person is a conduit of intersectional expression. You never get to see the totality of any person all the time. And yet every single fraction of their being shows up in every single room they enter. Therefore, how you treat a person, listen to me, this is the line. How you treat a person can either embrace their full humanity or trigger them to believe that only pieces of them are welcome. How you treat a person can either embrace their full humanity or trigger them into believing that only pieces of them are welcome. So that when we're talking about intersectionality and creating equitable spaces, we're trying to say that the wholeness of every person's identity is welcome in space, regardless of what that space is. Whether that space is a corporate space, whether it's a nonprofit space, whether it's a religious space, whether it's an educational space, whether it's a retail space, whether it's a healthcare space. I know we've got some healthcare workers on here. Regardless of the space that you are creating, what is important is that whoever enters that space feels as though they are safe enough to express the fullness of their humanity without the retaliation of discrimination. And the fact of the matter is as of right now, that is not a reality. Not everybody in our societies, in our communities, can go into every single space their full authentic self. Not everybody can walk into a room being a Black homosexual woman, or maybe a Black trans woman, or a Hispanic non-binary woman, a Black male who is in a relationship with his trans partner, right? Not everyone feels safe enough to walk into rooms with the fullness of their human expression and know that they are not going to experience some kind of discrimination. And if we are going to have organizations, entities, workplaces where everyone can occupy space, then we must be willing to accept people as they choose to identify. We must be willing to embrace all of the pieces and parts of every person as they choose to express them. Because the moment that we say a person is no longer welcome or safe because of a piece of their identity, right? Because sexual orientation is not the whole of a person's identity, right? Race is not the whole of a person's identity. Religion is not the whole of a person's identity. They are only pieces of a person's identity. And so if we're now saying that, well, if you come in this room with a hijab, I am now going to treat you differently, then that now means that there are individuals who cannot come into space their whole authentic self. And it also shows that you, in fact, are not operating equitably, and that you might be operating through the lens of equality, maybe, but equality actually does not accomplish the work. Equity is what actually accomplishes the work of wholeness, of acceptance, of affirmation. So that when we're talking about ensuring that we're creating equitable spaces, we've got to understand that intersectionality understood leads to equity applied. So that at the end of this, finally, there are some questions that I want you to kind of take away with you and to ponder. The first that I really want you to ask yourself leaving this is, does my organization service its clients, patients, customers, or community members from their positionality? Meaning that I do not force you to change or alter yourself in any way in order to receive services, resources, or opportunity from me. It's a big question we all have to kind of ask ourselves. Am I forcing anybody in my particular workplace, in my particular religious congregation? Am I forcing anyone when I give them health services? Am I forcing anybody to not fully embrace an aspect of their identity in order to receive services, opportunities, or resources? The second question that I think is critical for us to all reflect on is my workplace, is my organization, is my religious congregation, is it one that is affirming of difference? Is it affirming of diversity? Is it affirming of the various ways that people's humanity shows up? Or do people feel as though it is only safe to bring pieces of themselves into your establishment, right? Do you have people who are intentionally hiding very real parts of themselves for fear of retaliation, for fear of isolation, for fear of excommunication, for fear of being labeled, for fear of being discriminated against, for fear of no longer being welcome? Do I have some means of communicating that this place, the place that I lead, the place that I serve, work in, is affirming of difference and diversity? Because remember, we're not trying to tolerate people. To tolerate somebody just means that, if they come into the space, like if you hear, you hear. That's not, we are not trying to tolerate people. We want to affirm people. We want people's humanity to feel as though it is welcome. And there's a much different feeling when you walk into a room and you can tell and feel that the energy in that room is affirming of your full humanity rather than just tolerating your humanity, or that the energy in the space is trying to force you to change in order to get to a place where the room is now comfortable with you because you have acquiesced to the room. The final question is, what are some ways that intersectionality shows up in your organization? How can you use intersectionality as a tool and not just a metaphor to foster or create equity? Because I want us to remember that while Kimberly Crenshaw envisioned this term as just being a metaphor, it has now blown up into something so much greater. It's a tool now. And what that simply means is that we can look at intersectionality through the lens of understanding systems of power and dominance. We can look at it through the lens of human expression, individual human expression, group human expression, as well as the multiplicitous ways in which we now actually have to combat, address, deal with many forms of discrimination. We have to have intersectional approaches to intersectional problems, right? So where can I find intersectionality in my organization? Where can I use intersectionality in my organization to ensure that I am creating equitable spaces? Well, I thank all of you for taking this hour your lunch hour, your lunch break, to spend this time here with us at the Office of Human Rights and Equity. I just want to remind you that we are an office that is passionate and committed to protecting and promoting human rights here in Howard County, Maryland. And so if you or anyone that you know experiences any kind of discrimination in Howard County, Maryland, I want to encourage you to reach out to us at this office, 410-313-6430, or you can email us at OHRE@howardcountymd.gov. We want to help you. We want to promote your humanity. We want to protect your humanity. So please make sure that you join us and reach out to us if you or anyone you know experiences discrimination in Howard County, Maryland. I also want to encourage you to make sure that you are following us on social media. Make sure that you like and follow the Facebook page, Facebook, Howard County Office of Human Rights and Equity, or HOCO, OHRE. That is on Facebook and Twitter. Also on Instagram. Make sure you're following us, because this we've got so many amazing things coming up. Even tomorrow we've got another edition of our bystander intervention and cultural awareness training. So if you would like to take that, just please be sure that you're following us on social media and register for that, so that we can get you trained on how to effectively intervene when you see individuals experiencing any kind of discrimination or abuse. I know, I don't know if you guys heard this over the news, but there is an individual who actually was sexually assaulted on a train in Philly. And this is broad daylight with multiple people in the space, and individuals chose to not step in and intervene, but rather to simply record the assault. And so we really want to talk with you and train you, rather, on how to safely and effectively intervene when you see moments of discrimination happening to individuals. So that is a virtual training. If you are interested in that, please be sure to follow us on social media so that you can get the link to get that training as well. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to having you at many more of our in-person and virtual sessions. All righty. Have a good day.